Hey, my busy bees, it's Brittany and welcome back. So, this week we are hopping into our latest installment of True Crime and Makeup, and that is all about Dr. HH Holmes or Henry Howard Holmes. Now, Dr. HH Holmes, for those of you who are not aware, he is the first serial killer known in the US. And this story goes way back, okay? Way back. And it takes place in my hometown of Chicago, amongst a couple of other places. But the meat of the story takes place in Chicago. And he is known as, like I said, a serial killer. But a lot of the story that you guys hear is fabricated. So we are going to dive into all of the stuff that we can actually prove happened during the life and times of Dr. H.H. Holmes. So if you want to hear the true, the real on this man, stay tuned. Okay, y'all. So just a little quick plug here. You know, the face, the skin is always prepped, done with skincare before I apply my makeup. And just like I said before, and I asked you guys about it, and you guys were pretty responsive in the comments, I will be doing a shorter video covering true crime stories, but doing my skincare. Now, my nighttime routine is a bit longer than my daytime routine, so I'll be using that routine to tell a short story, and we will see how that goes, y'all. But talking about today's story, H.H. Holmes, or Henry Howard Holmes, was probably the most infamous originator of serial killing that most people in America think of. But a lot of the stories are just folklore. He had a huge piece of property in downtown Chicago called the Murder Castle. And a lot of the things that they said happened within the castle, they can't prove. No one can really prove. So I decided to cover all the crimes that I can find information on, factual information on. He is still a serial killer in his own right, just with what we can prove, although he was only actually convicted for one murder. Yes, one murder. Your most infamous serial killer has been convicted of one murder. But we will talk about all of that, y'all. So let's hop into this look and this story. So I'm going to start off using a new product to me. This seems like a pretty old product to most, but I've never seen it, so it's new to me. It is the GlamGlow Supermattify 6-Acid Clarifying Primer, and this is really supposed to help with all-day oil control, it says. So we will see how this goes. Y'all know I've been looking for that holy grail oily skin primer. I have not found it yet, other than my Fenty Matte. So let's see. Dr. H.H. Holmes was born as Herman Webster Mudgett on May 16, 1861. And he was born into a family of descendants of English settlers. And his family was also a family of farmers and also devout Methodists. He was born into a family of 5 siblings total. And it was said that there was never any abuse or anything within his childhood. He had a normal childhood, normal parents, just very devout, religious family. Now, his family lived in Gilmanton, New Hampshire, and it was said that he did really well in school. He was actually teased as a child for doing so well. And that's something that happens very common. I was a very smart kid in school, and I had instances of being teased because I was smart, or because I knew the answer, or because I got good grades, because it just wasn't cool to be smart. It wasn't cool to get good grades, which is exactly the opposite of what I teach my kids today, because it's the truth. The cool kids aren't doing so well now, and the smart kids are the cool adults. So, but it was said that there was an incident where they took him and put him in a closet with a skeleton to scare him, and as a form of teasing or bullying him because he was the smart kid. Some people think that kind of set the tone for his adulthood, or it had some type of impact on him growing up. I don't know that it would have had an impact to the extent that his life turned, but it's always a possibility amongst other things that could have happened to him that we're just not aware of. I am going to take my KOSAS Airbrow Brow Gel. Now, at the age of 16, Herman graduated from high school and he began to teach. Now I am taking my KOSAS Brow Pop Dual Defining Pencil and I am going to define the brows. Now, in 1878, he married a woman by the name of Clara Loving, and they got married and had their son Robert 2 years later in 1880. Now, shortly after this, he started an apprenticeship with a doctor and he was able to get into college in Vermont. And he only stayed there for a year before leaving that particular program. So in 1882, he started at the University of Michigan, where he studied medicine and chemistry. Now I'm taking my NARS Complete Soft Matte Concealer and cleaning up these brows. We are still going to refer to him as Herman because that's what his mama named him. So Herman actually graduated college from the University in Michigan in 1884. Now, this was also the same year that his wife left him. It was said that he was really violent and really abusive towards Clara, so it wasn't a surprise that she just picked up and left him one day. Thank God she had the courage to get out of there. Now, after she left him, this is where all the strange occurrences start happening. I won't necessarily say that they were defined crimes, but at the very least, strange occurrences started happening with Herman. Now I'm going to color correct just a smidge with my Born This Way concealer. So after his wife left him, he moved to New York. And when he moved to New York, it was said that he was often seen with a young boy. And one day, people just stopped seeing him with the young boy. And when he was asked about where this boy went, his response was, he just went back home with his parents. Why he was not with his parents in the first place and he was with Herman, we never really find that out. But no investigation was done into the disappearance of this little boy, and Herman just kind of disappeared from New York. So after this strange occurrence happened, he moved from New York to Philly. And when he moved to Philly, he got a job at a drugstore. Now, while he was working at said job at the drugstore, there was a young boy that died from the medication that was given to him by Herman. No further explanation on that either, but Herman again disappears. So this time when he disappeared, he actually fled to Chicago, and that is when he changed his name to Henry Howard Holmes. Dr. Henry Howard Holmes. Now I am taking my best friend, Bobbi Brown, and this is in C106 or Cool Chestnut, and I am going to get this complexion together, y'all. This is my summer color, so it is a little bit darker than my normal months when I don't go outside. So it's time, y'all. It is time to pull out those summer colors. Yes, you should have a different color foundation in the summer versus the winter. Yes, you should. Now, he also married a woman named Myrta Belknap, and he was still married to Clara when he married this woman. And he claimed that, Clara had an affair. She cheated on me. That's why I want a divorce. So he supposedly filed for a divorce, and it never ever was finalized. But he married this woman anyway, without being divorced. Herman, who is now HH Holmes, and Murda have a daughter together by the name of Lucy. She is born in 1889, and they live together as a family in Wilmette, Illinois, which is a suburb outside of the city of Chicago. Now I am going to take my Dose of Colors concealer. Let's brighten up this summer skin. Now, he also married a woman by the name of Georgina Yoke in Colorado in January of 1894. So he has now 3 wives. Now, let's talk about the main event. What everybody talks about of what happened in Chicago and him building the murder castle and all that good stuff. So in 1886, he's in Chicago and he gets a job at a drugstore. And this drugstore is on 63rd and Wallace in Inglewood. He was able to work there and prove himself to the owners. It was a couple who owned the drugstore, and they eventually sold the store to Henry. Now, this is where another one of those myths come in, because he was said to have murdered the owners, the couple that owned the drugstore, and that's how he got ownership and that's how he took over the store. But it wasn't true. They actually lived out their lives after they sold him the property, the store. They lived out their full normal lives as a couple and died like normal people. And then another story that kind of came up around this time was that he had killed his colleague around the same time that he moved to Chicago, 1886. He had killed his colleague, Dr. Robert Leacock, and he actually confessed to murdering his colleague. This actually never happened either. He actually lived until 1889, and he actually died in Ontario, Canada. So another one of the confessions that HH Holmes made out of the 27 murders that he confessed to, it was just not true. And now I'm going to take my Fenty Skin Sticks and Caviar. Now, by 1888, he had owned the drugstore for a while and business was doing really well. So he actually decided that he was going to buy the plot of land that was across the street from the drugstore that he owned. And he was going to build a new store on the main floor. And then he was going to have a second floor that was actually apartments that were available to rent. He was a con man by nature. So he had people hired and he would fire them before he had to pay them, to make sure that he would get them to work long enough, maybe a month or so. And then when it came time to pay them, he would fire them. He would take materials from contractors while they were working on it. He would hide it in the walls and in different areas where they wouldn't look to find their materials. And he would rip them off that way. This man had over 50 lawsuits filed against him just in Chicago alone. So con man, yes, he was. Now, he was also doing other cons. Like he would have people, fill out for insurance policies, and then he would fake their deaths, and then they would collect the money. So he had lawsuits against him for that as well. I'm also going to take just a little bit of this and contour my nose with it. And by 1892, he had decided to add a third floor. And the third floor was supposed to be for a hotel kind of thing on the third floor. So the first floor was the store. The second floor were apartments that you could rent. And then the third floor was the hotel that was for shorter stay. Now, by this time, like I said, he was being sued by architects, contractors, anybody you could think of for non-payment. So what did he do? He set the third floor on fire. And after he set that third floor on fire, he tried to collect on his insurance policy. And they sued him for that. I am going to take my 2 Laura Mercier powders to set the face. Now, he was building all of this to be ready and set to go for the World Fair of 1893. And this is also really when it becomes like that castle design that we all know as being the infamous murder castle as well. Now, the fair was the World Fair or the Columbian Exposition. And what he would do is he would place ads in the newspaper advertising that he had lodging available for the World Fair. And that is how he kind of made his money. That's why he wanted to have his building built up to where it was ready with the hotel and the apartments and so forth and so on. Now, he also had to turn the World Fair into a con. So he had an acquaintance by the name of Benjamin Pitezel. We'll get more into him in a second. But what HH Holmes would do is he would take the Pitezel children down to the fair, and he would use them to con rich women that looked wealthy at the fair, to coming and staying at his hotel. Now, his actual hotel or the building itself was said to have been, like I said, it was 3 floors, and there was also a basement. And it was said to have like maze-like hallways to where you just could not figure out where you were while you were walking around the actual hotel. And there were rooms that only locked from the outside, and they were soundproof rooms. And there was also said to be peepholes into the rooms that none of the actual occupants really noticed. And in between the walls, there was like secret passages to get to these different peepholes so that H.H. Holmes could look in on the tenants or the guests that he had staying there. There was also traps like in the ceilings and the floors. It was just weird. There was like a greased chute, almost like a greased chute that was said to go straight down into the basement. And supposedly it was big enough to fit a human into. There was also an oven in the basement that was big enough to fit a human into. So I think all of these pieces and all of these parts of the building really fed into the legend or the folklore, the story of the things that actually happened or the things that people assumed happened in this building. Now, it was also said that another one of H.H. Holmes's hustles was to actually, he sold skeletons to the local medical schools like University of Chicago. He was the seller, the provider of human skeletons. So that really drove the question of, well, where's he getting these real human skeletons from? He would also use human skeletons in his insurance schemes where he was taking out insurance policies and then pretending that the person died, using these cadavers as like the body of the dead person to claim the insurance payouts. So it was just a big mystery of where he was actually getting these bodies from. I don't have no evidence of him doing things, but it sounded like he was doing some things in that building. Now let's get to the crimes that we do know for sure about. I am going to bronze with my Revolution Glow bronzer. Now, the first victim that we know of was Julia Smythe, and she was actually the wife of an employee of his building. Now, she was also his mistress. So this man already had 3 wives, but if that wasn't enough, he also had some mistresses on the side to keep him occupied. And her husband actually found out about the affair with H.H. Holmes, and he left her and their small daughter that they had as well. Now, on Christmas in 1891, it was said that both Julia and her daughter went missing and no one ever saw them again. He said that Julia died during an abortion, and that was that. Now, in May of 1892, so just 5 months or so after the disappearance of his mistress and her daughter, he then starts an affair with a woman by the name of Emmeline Segrande, and she disappeared about a year later after she had started an affair with H.H. Holmes. He confessed that he had actually locked her in a vault, and she then suffocated, and after that happened, he used her skeleton and sold it to one of the schools. Now, it was also said that the same thing happened to Edna Van Tassel, who was his third known victim. And there was also Minnie Williams, and Minnie Williams was an actress, and she was from Texas, but she came to the hotel looking for work at H.H. Holmes's hotel. And he found out that she happened to own a piece of property down in Texas. Now, him and his, best friend, Mr. Peitzel, saw this as a grand opportunity to run a scheme, run a con on Minnie as well. So he actually convinced her to sign this property in Texas over to someone by the name of Alexander Bond. And Alexander Bond was just another name that HH Holmes actually used himself. So he was Alexander Bond. He then took that property and signed it over to his con partner, Benjamin Peitzel, but under the name of Benton T. Lyman. So everybody just got fake names around here, and signed the property over to him. So I think it was probably safe to assume that they were having an affair as well, they being Minnie and HH Holmes, because they then got an apartment together in Lincoln Park, which is within Chicago city limits, but it's kind of like a little village or community within Chicago. And they got an apartment together in Lincoln Park. And one day, Minnie decided that she was going to invite her sister over to their apartment. Now, after she did that, neither her or her sister were ever seen or heard from again. So basically, he got her there to work. He pretty much seduced her, had an affair with her, got her to sign over her own property to him and his business partner, and then got rid of the dead weight. Now I am going to take my Huda Beauty, and this is the Coral Obsessions palette, and I'm going to create a cute little look. Now, after all of this took place in 1894, he decided that he was going to run again, and this time he ran to Texas, where he had some newly acquired property. And while he was in Texas, he started to build another hotel, and pretty much to start this whole process all over again, but just in Texas. So he was doing the same thing. He was running his same schemes, same cons, but this time he got arrested in Texas, y'all. Now, let's talk about how he got arrested. Now, in 1894, before the arrest, he had come up with a plan with Peitzel, and what they were supposed to do was they were supposed to run that same old insurance scheme that they had been running, but this time they were going to run it using Peitzel as the subject. So they were supposed to fake his death and then use a body, replace his body with a cadaver, and then collect on the insurance policy. Now, what happened was, we later find out, instead of faking his death, he actually killed Peitzel. His story was that he set him on fire while he was alive. He wanted to make himself to be like this big, crazy, bad guy. But what he had actually done is he had just knocked him out with chloroform. And I think he used too much chloroform and actually killed him. And then to cover up, he set him on fire. Now, in the midst of all this, he had convinced Peitzel's wife that Peitzel had just run off. He didn't know, what was going on. But he convinced his wife to sign over custody of the Peitzel children. So they had 2 girls and a boy, and the son went missing, and he took the daughters with him away from the wife of Mr. Peitzel, and she just never knew where her children went. So when he finally confessed and told where the girls were, he said that he locked them in a trunk, and he drilled a hole in that trunk, and then he put a tube through that hole and gassed those girls to death. And then after he gassed them to death, he buried them in his cellar. So there was also a detective that was tracking him after the incident with Peitzel, after he had gotten the children signed over to him and he had gone and fled to Ontario, Canada with the girls. No one knew where the son was. but the two girls were supposedly with him in Ontario, Canada. Detective Frank Geyer had been tracking him for years upon years. He tracked every move. He tracked from when he moved from Texas to Indianapolis, where he had a small cottage there. He also tracked him in Ontario, Canada, where he had some property there as well. He basically kept an eye on all the movements of HH Holmes, but because he hadn't had any evidence, he couldn't really move in on him just yet. But in come the Pinkertons, and the Pinkertons were hired because during a previous stint in prison, HH Holmes had gotten in contact with one of the inmates by the last name of Hedgepath, and he had given him some information on an attorney that could help with his insurance scheme that Holmes and Paiso had come up with. And he was promised, being the inmate, he was promised $500 payment in exchange for that information. When H.H. Holmes got out of prison and never actually paid the man is when he said, nah, you're not about to con me too. So he went to the warden and he let the warden know, this is what their plan is. They are conning insurance companies and he didn't pay me. So the warden actually hired the Pinkertons, and the Pinkertons were a security and detective agency, and they were basically headhunters or kind of like private investigators. But interesting fact, they are now called Securitas. So yes, that company that you see everywhere, Securitas, that was originally the Pinkertons detective agency. But that's who was hired to hunt him down and capture him, and honey, they got him. So he was arrested on the insurance fraud of him and Benjamin Paiso faking his death. Now, once Detective Geyer finally had enough cause, he actually went to the property that was owned by H.H. Holmes in Ontario, Canada, and he dug up the cellar. And he was surprised by what he found, y'all. And what he found was the two Paiso girls buried in H.H. Holmes' cellar in Ontario. And he also found that one of the girls had their foot cut off, one of their feet cut off. And the reason that her foot was cut off was because she had a club foot, and she could easily be identified should she be found with this clubbed foot. So Holmes decided that he was going to remove that foot so that she could not be identified. Now, outside of that property in Ontario, Canada, he had also rented a small cottage in Indianapolis, Indiana. In this small cottage, they actually found the bones of the third child, the Paiso's son, in the chimney of this small cottage. Luckily, his teeth were there, so they were able to identify him by his teeth. Now, this is where they start to take a closer look at this murder castle that he has in Chicago. They start to tear it apart, try to look for any type of evidence that anything else happened on this property. And it's never really said that there's anything of significance actually found there, but a lot of horror stories come out of there. But we don't have any real connections to any real crimes outside of the ones that we covered that actually took place in the murder castle. Now, in October of 1895, he was actually convicted of the murder of Benjamin Paiso, and he was actually sentenced to death. Okay, guys, now I'm going to put on my magnetic lashes, so I will be right back. So now I'm going to apply my LYS blush, and this is in Empower. Now, on May 17th, 1896, he was hanged while in prison. That was his death sentence. And the universe just had it to where he had to suffer for everything that he had inflicted on all these other people. He had to suffer himself. So he actually was strangled for about 20 minutes before his neck just finally snapped. So he suffered. Now, his final wish was to be buried under a slab of concrete. Because he did have such a big reputation, he feared that, somebody would want to come and dig his body up and do whatever with it. So he requested to be buried with a slab of concrete on top of him. Now, they did honor that request and they did bury him with a slab on top of his grave. And that should have been the end of HH Holmes. And now I'm going to take my Becca highlighter in chocolate geode. And then I'm going to take just a little bit of my Fruit Snacks Gloss Bomb Cream from Fenty. So in 1895, while he was in prison, the murder castle was mysteriously set on fire. And now, as it stands, there is a post office where that murder castle used to sit. That's the Inglewood Post Office. And also in 2017, there was so many claims that it wasn't HH Holmes that was buried under that concrete slab. He wasn't actually there, whatever, what have you. So the police actually just got tired of hearing it. So they actually dug up the concrete, dug him up, exhumed his body, and did some testing and confirmed that yes, it was HH Holmes that was buried and that was hanged back in 1896. There was also some information that I found about when they walked into the murder castle while he was in prison. They found things like bloody clothing, dissecting devices, and torture devices in the basement of the murder castle. But again, there was really nothing of like evidence of any other actual people that we could identify or unidentified people on that premises. And there was also talk about him possibly being Jack the Ripper and all of this kind of stuff, but that started to lead me down a whole nother rabbit hole, y'all. So I kind of just left that one where it is. If you want to look it up, you can look up the connections between Jack the Ripper and HH Holmes. But yeah, that was it. That's the story of HH Holmes, y'all. All right, y'all. So this is the final look. And I am feeling real orangey, bronzy, reds, all that today. I'm feeling copper, all that today. But yeah, that is the story of HH Holmes. He is our first serial killer. And he confessed to 27 murders. He only actually was convicted of 1. So that is the real on HH Holmes. He was a womanizer. He was a bigamist. He was a con artist. He was a murderer. He was a lot of things, y'all. So I hope y'all enjoyed today's story. I hope you also enjoyed today's look. But other than that, y'all, make sure that you subscribe if you have not already. Make sure you like the video and also make sure you hit that notification bell so that you get notified when I post new content. I also appreciate all of the suggestions that y'all are giving me. I am loving it. I have a long list now of cases to cover for y'all. I know y'all are going to love them. I am also introducing skincare and some true crime with shorter stories, but still just as crazy. So make sure y'all check that out. Make sure you are subscribed. You do not want to miss these, y'all. All right. Other than that, it's been so fun. It's been so real. And until next time, love you guys. Bye. Say hey, Sheba.